Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Jeremy Werner. Let's talk with Joey Wagner now as we talk about the Illinois side of this Illinois-Michigan State matchup. Joey, it feels like a long time since we've seen Illinois play football. It's only been like a week and a half, but it feels like a long time. And we have some things to talk about, but boy, these final three games are going to shape a lot about how we talk about this program in the offseason.
Which is very similar and very different to how we talked about these final three games in August. Like in August, these final three games were, this is your bowl push. This is your push to 6, get back to a postseason appearance. And now it's, okay, you're already bowl eligible. Can you avoid that November slump that we've seen the last couple of years from Illinois? And can you really take this from a 6-win to a 9-10 win, depending on how that bowl game goes season? So there's a lot of overlap, but also just very different conversations with these last three games.
Yeah, and I still feel like you have such great opportunities here. I mean, you've had a tough schedule. I've included Minnesota in that because they were playing really good football when you played them. Of course, they go on the road to Rutgers and lose. But Michigan State, one of the worst offenses and defenses in the Big Ten. Rutgers' defense has been pretty poor outside of that Minnesota game. And then Northwestern, I know they've won a couple games here, but that's a struggling program right now. So if you can find a way to return to the quality of play you were against Nebraska and Kansas and some of those games, it feels like you can really end the season strong, but you just don't have a great taste in your mouth right now after, losing back-to-back games here.
No, and that's the thing. Like you said, it feels like forever since we've seen Illinois play. It probably doesn't feel as long if they beat Minnesota and all of a sudden you're talking about the possibility of 10 regular season wins. This team's probably in the college football playoff rankings. It's a different conversation. But because of that, now it's kind of like, oh, gosh, it's like, imagine how long it feels for them to wash that taste out of their mouth. But that's just kind of the feeling right now, Jeremy. It's not a very inspiring game against Minnesota offensively in ways we didn't think it wouldn't be inspiring going into that. But it's a chance against a Michigan State team that is not very good coming into Memorial Stadium.
All right, let's dive into our 6-pack of questions here. Number one, Joey, what was the biggest key for the off week for Illinois, in your opinion?
Get healthy. As healthy as you can possibly get, which does not include Dylan Rosiak. We saw him scooter by us today. We know he had surgery and he's out for the season. Doesn't include Caden Fagan. Obviously, he's been out for the season with a hip injury. But Pat Bryant, we talked to him today. He was not in the walking booth that he was in the last time we saw him. Xavier Scott, it sounds like he, in the off week, like many starters, did not do much physically. He doesn't need to. Xavier Scott, we know who Xavier Scott is as a football player. Get him rested up. Brett Bielema hasn't said the nature of his injury, but we saw him on the sideline moving his ankle around. So I'd imagine some sort of ankle issue that he had dealt with. But just take a breath, get healthy, collect yourselves. Coaches that have a whole different key, and maybe you'll get into that with self-scouting. But they just had to get healthy, man, because they were starting to really pile up in ways that we've seen it pile up in the past where it's like, remember in 2022, it was the cornerback room, right? And that position just got hit hard, and you started to see, not to that level, but certain key positions start to mount a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Even a guy like Luke Almyer, who, we haven't seen a specific injury, but that guy's taken some hits. That guy's played a lot of football this year. And just to get him healthy, get that offensive line healthy, maybe playing, better ball for them. I think all those things are really important. Just getting that week to recover, to recuperate. And then the other part is, Joey, is that self-scout, right? Like that self-scout is really, really important. And I found it interesting that Brett Bielema, even though he said, like we only had so many evaluation days left, that he kept his entire staff basically in Champaign during the last week, because I think it's important to maximize these final three games. What's going to help recruiting more than anything outside of NIL is winning more games and ending the season with 2 or 3 more wins instead of maybe 1 or 0. So I do think that was a smart thing to do. And we've talked about some of the issues, getting the most out of Luke Almyer. Do you go more up tempo, right? Like, do you, on defense, get more aggressive on third downs where you really, really struggled? I think all those things are really important to figure out. What are we good at? How can we cover up some of our weaknesses that are getting exposed here? How are teams attacking us? And what are our tendencies? So Aaron Henry and Barry Lundy talked about, they went through all that. And I think we'll see after a bye week, off week, that Brett Bielema's been pretty good. 5-1 at Illinois after off weeks. Now, the Purdue game was a mixed bag. It came out, took a 27-3 lead, and then, went downhill quick for your defense after that. But I think the results of that off week are going to be really important because this coaching staff needs to make the most of this final 3 games and put their players in best positions to succeed.
Yeah, they need to make the most of it, both to what still is very much on the table in terms of 9 or maybe double-digit wins for Illinois. But you want to ride a wave of wins and not another November. Hey, they went 1-3 in the month of November, 1-2, however it would line up. Like, you want to ride that wave into transfer portal season when we can pick out. It's senior day, right? So we can talk about this. With Illinois, like, you're probably going to need to find a new left tackle. You're going to need to find some wide receivers, probably an edge rusher or 2. You want to ride into the transfer portal season with some momentum rather than, hanging on for dear life at 6 wins or 7 wins here.
All right, Joe, let's go into number 2 then. 2 big losses on the defense. What concerns you more? Dylan Rosiak, obviously out for the season, but specifically with this game. Is it him being out, or is it Miles Scott, free safety, being out for a half after that targeting penalty against Minnesota?
It's Rosiak to me because we've talked about the linebacker position time over this season and just how we want to see more from it. Maybe that ends up one of those weird blessings in disguise down the line, and maybe Malachi Hood gets this moment where you see all this athleticism start to blossom. Maybe James Croots, the game slows down. But if you're Illinois, you want your team captain out there. You want your leading tackler out there, a guy who – there are flaws in Dylan Rosiak's game. You can go up and down every player in America and find flaws in their game, but you're better with him on the football field. Miles Scott, I think you can survive with Mac Rusetich for a half. I think personally, Jeremy, the communication, the in-helmet communication without Miles Scott, that to me is more of a, okay, monitor that rather than just missing him for a half. And he's a really talented player, but Mac Rusetich hasn't had to be in that role where he's had to put the helmet on and communicate across that secondary. So that's something to monitor, but it's got to be Rosiak, man.
Yeah, and I just feel like we've seen Mac Rusetich enough to know that I think he can be solid. He's a good athlete. I think he can track the ball really well. Former outfielder, knows how to go and attack the ball. And I think he's been a little bit better in run support. Last year against Iowa had a bad moment, but I think he's been better this year so far. So, and to have that experience last game, linebacker already was a weakness of this team, right? Like Mac Rusetich has Matthew Bailey next to him, has Xavier Scott with him. Linebacker was already a weakness, and now you took away your best player. I like the thought of James Croots, right? He's long, he's violent, he's a big hitter, but he's been over-aggressive at times, and I think you saw that at times against Minnesota. You also saw him lead the team in tackles after Dylan Rosiak left. So it's just he's kind of unproven, and I think he's going to be attacked, maybe even in the passing game, because we saw Darius Taylor with that last game as well. So what already was a weakness, you lost your best player. Like, I just feel better about the secondary than I do about linebacker. So I think Croots is going to get a lot of Rosiak snaps. I do think you'll see a little bit of Malachi Hood, a little bit of Kenenna Odeluga, but against a Michigan State team that, plays 12 personnel a lot. Jack Velling is a good tight end. I think you're going to see, Ryan Mead a little bit more. And I thought he had his best game against Minnesota. So that experience is going to be really important. But you do need James Croots to grow up quick. He's a redshirt sophomore. You got to be able to count on a guy like that. So Brett Bielema said, he always says at some point in November, there's going to be guys that you don't expect you're going to have to lean on, that you have to lean on and make plays. And I think James Croots is going to be one of those. But I also think Matthew Bailey is going to have to step up, right? He kind of is a hybrid linebacker safety anyway. He's going to have to be really sound and start to play his best ball and run support and in coverage on tight ends as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm with you. I think you can mask both of the position and with the secondary. You can mask Mac Rusetich back there for a half of football. I don't, you're playing basically center field. Which, should they play that if he gets a pick, that song? I think they ought to play that. That'd be awesome.
John Fogerty? Yeah.
Of course, Yeah, you were 22 when that song hit.
Yes.
Hit the radio? Yeah. But yeah, you can hide that a little bit, right? But linebacker, we've seen teams point to the Illinois linebacker effectively and say, we're attacking there. Like, we're going to go right there. It's a little harder to do that in the secondary, but I'm with you. I think this is, I was trying to find a comparison. You think back to like Tariq Barnes at Wisconsin during that COVID game, Jake Hansen goes out, and that was when we really first saw Tariq Barnes hit the gas at that linebacker position and find his way there. Dylan Rosiak wasn't like in season, but that spring he was able to push and ultimately take over for CJ Hart. Like, I don't think anyone's dethroning Dylan Rosiak. I'm just saying, like, these reps are moments that someone can say, oh, that wasn't bad. Like, they got out there under the lights and they put it together. Now there's more depth evolving there. Now there's more guys that Illinois can go trust out there. And I think the candidates, and I'm saving my Kanena Odaluga nugget here for a little later on in the podcast, Jeremy, but Malachi Hood's so intriguing. And, between him and, you're right, if James Cruz, you don't want him to slow down, but you might need him to, like, if you're
rein it in a little bit.
Yeah, if you're at 100 miles an hour all the time, like, you can do a lot of damage at 90 and maybe be a little more in control. But it just comes with reps, right? Like, that's kind of the end of the day is you've got to learn through some hard moments. I know you talked to Aaron Henry about Jaheim Clark, different position. You got to learn through that in the game. So we'll see how that plays out.
That's the risk, though, is you're having guys learn on the job, right?
In a big 3-game stretch.
Yeah, in a big 3-game stretch. Yeah. So every team's going through it right now, but obviously when you don't have a ton of depth in your program, that's when it shows up. Number 3, Joey, what is the key to getting Luke Altmyer back on track? I think we have confidence in Luke Altmyer, but it's worth just bringing up these stats. First 6 games for Luke Altmyer was unbelievable, right? He threw for 68% of his passes completed for 237 yards per game, 14 touchdowns, 1 interception. Last 3 games, 46 of 86, that's 54%, 156 yards per game, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 5 fumbles. Joey just hasn't been as crisp, hasn't been as good of a decision maker, and his ball security has been an issue. So what's the key for Illinois getting him back on track?
Yeah, I think maybe this is cheating and taking 2 answers. He said after the Minnesota game he likes to play with tempo, and I understand. And Brett Bielema in a way, but not directly, said like, you don't want to play Oregon with tempo because if things go south and your defense is out there forever, it's a tough spot to play complementary football. I think that window opens a little bit to play with some tempo and see what you can get going against Michigan State. And while you're playing with tempo, let him be in that RPO game and just say, hey, don't worry about running. Like, just let him feel the confidence of making the right read, whether that's giving the ball to Josh McCray more than 7 times or Aiden Lawfrey or just a quick hitter to Pat Bryant, Zachary Franklin, Tanner Arkin in the flat. Let him feel like, all right, yeah, I'm making these right decisions. I'm doing this right. We're matriculating the ball. We're going with a little urgency here. And I think that kind of puts it all back together. I don't know if I just stole one of yours, if I crowded over and took 2, but I think those 2 play hand in hand.
No, I think you're right. Like when my quarterback, who again has been my competitive advantage through our great starter, 6-1 start, a lot of that is because Luke Almyer was a competitive advantage for Illinois. He was the X factor in leading Illinois to those wins. I think you got to lean into it. When he's voicing, I'm more comfortable with this. When Pat Bryant, who is a competitive advantage, when he is saying these things, I think you got to lean into that. I know it can put your defense, which we're talking about some injuries and some harder situations where they may be playing more plays, maybe getting a little bit more tired. But I think Illinois has the opponents, to your point. This isn't Oregon that can do better in tempo than we can. This is Michigan State that's struggling to put up points right now. This is, I know Rutgers had a decent game and Cali Mass had a decent game, but that offense has struggled. Their defense has struggled to stop people. Northwestern, quarterback is an issue for them. I feel like you can win the shootout style, and that Barry Lunny kind of leaned into it last year. I'm wondering if he'll lean into that with his quarterback, his receivers, because that is the strength of this team right now. And against the Michigan State team that struggles to rush the passer, I kind of want Luke Altmyer to be in that RPO, and I want him sitting in that pocket and making those decisions. So I agree with you. I would heed that. Brett Bielema seemed to hint that he would. Barry Lunny didn't give much, but I think they'll do that, Joey, because Luke Altmyer is the key to your season. He has been so far, and he's the key to a strong finish.
Yeah, we should say when we say tempo, we're not trying to show you Chip Kelly at Oregon. Yeah. Like there are varying levels to tempo, and I think just
huddle. Like even if you're taking 10 seconds between or 15 seconds, the no huddle, I think that's just when these guys feel confident. They feel like they got the defense on their heels.
Absolutely, yeah, and kind of don't let them. If you don't sub, they don't sub, right? And just keep going, keep attacking. We've heard about the gas tanks of your wide receivers, of Pat Bryant, of Zachary Franklin. Go with that. Just let that go. as far as it'll take you, at least to start. And then if things start going sideways, and maybe you slow down a little bit, pull back on that, and get back into a little bit more of a normalized pace. But I think come out and try to make them uncomfortable and show that you can score and score quickly.
All right, Joey, number 4, what gives you the most optimism for Illinois against Michigan State?
Michigan State's turnover margin is one of the worst in the country. They're 123rd in turnover margin. I was beating the heck out of my mouse earlier to try to pull that up. They're -9 in that. And Illinois' defense at its best, and Aaron Henry has continued to go back. When I say, if you're not getting turnovers, what are you getting? You dance around a little bit and say you get turnovers. This defense thrives on those, and there's going to be opportunities for Illinois to force Michigan State turnovers. And I think the offense has shown, outside of a couple fumbles lately for Luke Almyer, which they had to have found some way to clean up or emphasize during the open week, like, they haven't turned it over a ton offensively. So let Matt Krasevich in that first half get one. Let Matthew Bailey make some plays, because the opportunity should be there, at least on paper.
Yeah, Aiden Childs has 11 interceptions. He has 6 fumbles this year. He's lost 3 of them. He's got multiple interceptions in 6 of 9 games so far. So for a team that has struggled to get takeaways, Joey, I mean, they had 3 against Michigan. They have, I think, 3 in the other 5 games, Big Ten games so far. So they have struggled to get those since the beginning of the season in non-conference play. You're going to have some opportunities, and you're going to need to make the most of them. But, man, if you get more possessions against this Michigan State team, I feel pretty confident in Illinois. The other thing is their offensive line is bad. Like, it is really bad. Like, Illinois has given up the most sacks in the Big Ten. They've given up 1 more than Michigan State so far, but they also do not run the ball well. We'll see if they do against Illinois. But I feel like this defensive front can really feast. Like, it has been feast or famine, it's felt like, with this defensive line. 6 sacks against Nebraska, 5 sacks against Michigan, and I think only 6 in the other 4 Big Ten games. But I do feel like this is an opportunity for Gabe Backus and Seth Coleman and Dennis Briggs to do well, and I do think it's on Aaron Henry to put them in some situations, get them in some one-on-one battles with 5-man rushes at times, get more aggressive on third down. But I do think, like, that being a weakness, like the trenches are a weakness for Michigan State right now. Like, they can stop the run, but they don't get after the quarterback either. So I just feel like in the trenches, that's kind of been a concern for Illinois, but it shouldn't be against this Michigan State team. So I think that should only highlight your passing attack more and potentially highlight your pass rush, which at times has been good. It's been inconsistent, but I feel like your passing game and your pass rush have advantageous matchups in this one.
Yeah, and pass rush, you nailed it. Aaron Henry, it's on him to get some of your game changers on that defensive front. Your Seth Coleman, Gabe Backus, probably maybe T.Y. Edwards, Dennis Briggs. Get them some one-on-one opportunities to get back there against Aiden Childs. This is a good segue, Jeremy, into number 5 for me.
Number 5, what concerns you most against Michigan State?
Yeah, Aiden Childs getting out of the pocket. His ability to move. Like, we have seen quarterbacks who can move be a problem for Illinois, whether it's on the RPO or on the option play. Illinois just has not – this isn't new to this year. Like that, every time you see a mobile quarterback and they present their own number of issues, it just feels like they're in a kind of a bigger issue for Illinois. So, you're just imagining a situation where you get him out of the pocket, then God forbid he runs on you. Like, so then things get – to be a little more difficult. So if you're able to get back in there and to get past, you've got to bring them down on that first opportunity, or it gets really long. And that's just, we've seen Illinois have pressures, but
Purdue,
not
Ryan Brown. Yeah,
absolutely, man. So, like, yeah, if the offensive line is going to afford you the opportunity to get to him, you've got to take care of it on that play. Otherwise, when that could just be a long situation if he can get out and run.
I feel like Aiden Childs gives you a lot of opportunities as a defense, but he also scares you because he's just a very talented quarterback. He's not quite the runner that Juice Williams was, but he's got that kind of potential. He can prolong plays, he can extend plays. And I do agree, Joey, that he's a factor in that run game, but he's also just got a big arm. He's got a really good freshman receiver, in Marsh. So I think that's a concern when you got a 6'3", 200-pound future NFL receiver who's a couple years away from that. But the other thing is Michigan State's running attack is not very good, but Illinois' run defense still concerns me. And without, your starting linebacker, your Mike linebacker in there, it's still a concern for me that if Illinois doesn't take an early lead or Michigan State has a lead, can they stop the run? Can they stop them on first and second down to force Michigan State to throw the ball, to force them into third and longs rather than third and shorts? Because, boy, Illinois has really struggled on first and second downs. That's made them struggle on third down. We can talk about the lack of pressure that they brought on third and long, but they're also just giving up a lot of third and shorts. And we've seen teams just run over them. So there's an athletic defensive front for Illinois, but it's not a very stout one. And then you add the questions at linebacker. I'm so concerned that a Michigan State rushing attack that I think is averaging like 90 yards per game during Big Ten play. I'm still concerned that, Nate Carter is good enough and that the defensive front for Illinois is at least questionable enough against the run that Michigan State can kind of control the clock there.
Absolutely. And I don't want to harp on it, but like those outside linebackers have to make the right reads on those, because if you've got a quarterback who can move, why wouldn't you try to put the outside linebackers in conflict? Because we've seen them struggle with that, Jeremy. So that's a huge concern. And like you can go down, you can say the same next week with Rutgers' ability to run the ball until Illinois shows it can effectively and consistently is probably the right word with the way it stops the run, because you can go back to Michigan and sure, you can put the asterisk and say, well, Michigan couldn't throw if it had to. You've just got to see them do it possession over possession, and until they don't, that's concerning.
I'll give you one more. I'm a little concerned about this offense's lack of explosiveness right now. First 6 games, Illinois averaged 5.5 big plays, which is 20-plus yard plays. Last 3 games, 2.3 big plays. Again, that's why I'm leaning into my passing attack, Joey. Caden Fagan being out is a part of that because he does have that ability, but also the offensive line needs to create some running room. And maybe you got to lean more into getting Aiden Lawfrey in space or getting Khalil Valentine into space. Josh McCray's been really good. I trust him most of these running backs. You got to find a way to create some explosive plays, and maybe that's a trick play or two, something different that we haven't seen quite yet. We just haven't seen a lot of those. So maybe you have a lead and you do one of those, but at some point I'm wondering if we see some of that.
Yeah, I wish there's not a stat. So this is just going to be talking off the top. It feels like opposing teams hit trick plays against Illinois like 50% more than Illinois hits trick plays again. Like we've seen Illinois give it a whirl here or there, and it's just like,
yeah, maybe they're just not good enough at it.
So right, and after that play, you just sit there thinking, so maybe could you given it to McCray up the middle? You know what I mean? Like there's just, you think like, I don't know if this is your best option, but then you see other teams come in.
But they had the flea flicker against Oregon, and Luke just missed it.
That's fair. It down the field. That's fair. But then, Purdue had that end around, they threw it down the field. So it's like I feel like when you're watching Illinois, you see other teams hit those weird plays, but it just feels like something is off with Illinois. And maybe that's the point: is hey, just keep it good at what you do what you're good at, and give the ball to Josh McCray or let Luke Altmyer make the right decisions within your offense.
Yeah. All right. Number 6, we'll dive off this game a little bit before we get to our picks to click and our bold predictions. Brett Bielema said the Illini are as hot as we've ever been in recruiting. How true is that, Joey?
It's hard. Like in season, I would say I would agree with that, but it's hard to compare like October, November when things are going well to like when the summer where it's specifically designed to just churn out commits and commits and commits. So like
I would say it's similar to 22, right? Because you flipped Colin Dixon, you flipped Malik Elzy, even though he didn't announce until January. But you felt like there was some momentum in 22 when they started on that run. And you're getting, I would say the biggest reason that they're as hot as they've ever been is the guys they're getting on campus. The guys they're getting on visits, like talked about Alex Graham, a 4-star, committed to Colorado, and it's Illinois and Michigan basically in that battle. Grant Bierman, can you flip a 4-star linebacker who's exactly what you need a linebacker from Purdue? I think a lot of that still has to play out, see if they can get Graham, see if they can get Bierman. But it does feel like the kids they're getting on campus, both in 25 and I would say 26. I feel like he thinks 26 is going to be a really good class. So I think that all has to play out. But then if you're an Illinois fan, you look at it and you're 53rd in the country in recruiting ranking, you're 16th in the Big Ten. So I can understand, like, they are not like red hot where it's like, oh my gosh, look what Illinois is doing in recruiting. But it is better. I do want to tell you, it is better. I think they're going to have more ammo in the transfer portal, both due to NIL and because of winning. But I feel like he thinks the end of the class of 25 and what could be the start of the 26 class could be as good as they've had in a while.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. And this 25 class looks a lot different if you can flip a Bierman and you can flip a Graham, and all of a sudden you've got a couple of headliners going up there with just straight up flips. And then you feel like, okay, I see what you're saying. And I get what Brett Bielema is saying. I think a little bit different in 22. Colin Dixon, let's be honest, like they did a good job of keeping those relationships and doing that. They also benefited from Wisconsin firing Paul Chris. Like you've just straight up won battles here without having to capitalize on a coaching change, which look, what's the stock in that or the value in that? I don't know, but it feels like it's worthy to say that, hey, what you're doing, like you're not capitalizing in so much as what other teams aren't doing. Like you're pushing what you're doing, and then you're starting to get some of these guys to really look at you. But yeah, you're right, man. Like someone could listen to this, roll their eyes, pull up the rankings and say, well, there's still this, and that's true. Yeah. But objectively, the Power 5 battles, the flips, average star ranking, this was going to be a smaller class anyway. Average star ranking isn't as stark, but it's certainly not putting you in the upper half of the Big Ten. But yeah, there's momentum going right now. And oh, hey, by the way, Jeremy, you got a top 400 quarterback in 2026, which probably does a lot of heavy lifting for what Brett Bielema says when he brings that up.
I think he felt really good about that one. Michael Clayton, big arm quarterback, had more than 24 Power 4 offers. Like it's gradual. Like Carson Boyd was a bit higher touted than Trey Petty, but Trey Petty was, one of the best quarterback prospects they've gotten in a little bit. So I do think it's just gradually building to where it's getting better, but they're not yet to that point where it's like, yep, Illinois is going to be a top half Big Ten program for the next 5 years. Like they're not there yet. But I do think they are getting the talent that they need to consistently be competitive. Now, can you take it to another level, Joey? Next year, can you get Nasir Ranking or J.C. Anderson or Max Suter? In 2026, can you build a foundation of 4-star talent, the type you need to take the program to the next level? But we could be looking in a month, and if they get Bierman and Graham to sign with Illinois, I think you're feeling really good about where this thing is heading. And then you start the transfer portal, and we see if they can find another Zachary Franklin, another J.C. Davis, another Dennis Briggs, because those have been obviously significant additions. And I think the transfer portal, what they did in the offseason, has been really good. I think it's been a really big bright spot. Even if Terrence Brooks hasn't been great and hasn't made the impact you thought, there's also a Torrey Cox who's made an impact, a Melvin Priestley who's been better than you would have thought when they got him. So I think we got to combine all those things. And at the end of December or January, we can look back and say, yeah, maybe they were hotter than they've been so far under Brett Bielema.
Yeah, and look, I don't think we need to wait that. Like we can say this is right in the conversation for the one or two hottest non-summer stretches we've seen at Illinois here. I completely lost, but it's interesting the way these classes, and we have enough body of work to look at how Brett Bielema and his coaching staff build these. The summer is the summer. Illinois is not alone in that. July is or June OVs are your get your foundation, get 10, 12, 13 guys locked in, ready to go. Obviously, a couple before that to be those recruiters. Then that class gets a little quieter for your August, September, October. It picks up, and then you're in flip season. And like Illinois has not shied away from getting involved in flip season, and you've seen a couple so far in this class. And they're obviously shooting for more. You go back, as you mentioned, Colin Dixon, Malik Elzy, Gabe Akis. Like you can go down the line and see who they've added late as flips. Like that's a market that kind of runs a little quieter anyway, because I don't know that a lot of kids are, standing up to shout like, hey, I'm committed, but by the way, like I'm still pretty open. That runs a little more under the radar. But it's something Illinois has done a pretty decent job of, good job of in the last couple of recruiting classes.
Yeah, so I think if they can add like 2 or 3 more to this class of 2025, and also maybe add 2 or 3 more to this class of 2026 before January, I think we'll look back on it and say, yeah, it's probably true. It's probably true what he said. All right, picks to click against Michigan State. Last week we didn't do that well, but Joey, you got the one victory, I believe.
Josh McCray.
Yeah, Josh McCray with the long touchdown run. Despite only 7 touches, he still got it. I went with Aiden Laughley, picked the wrong running back, picked the wrong kid. Seth Coleman and Gabe Backus, no. Neither of us got
No. Yeah, I will say, like, I kind of slipped my mind because open weeks and you just put basketball on top of everything. You forget. I wish we had asked Barry Lunny on Monday about going away from Josh McCray. I think it's important that we say when we kind of wish we could have done something better, and I wish we had, because when I saw that again the other day, I was counting up their stats. I thought, all right, he just had 7 touches. That's not nearly.
My bad this week was not asking Aaron Henry about Matt Krasevich taking over at free safety. I did ask Corey Parker today, but Aaron Henry's the one who specifically coaches him.
We're going to have like a long end of these pods, like picks to click, bold prediction, my bad of the week.
It's what was that? Errors and corrections on PTI, basically. I like that, owning up to the mistakes.
Yeah, I'll take that. My pick to click is Pat Bryant this game. Final game. I don't want to lean in too hard to the cliches and final game at Memorial State. But if there's anybody who feels like they would take that kind of, it's my last one here and run with it, it's Pat Bryant. He's also just been, I think he's healthier now, obviously, than he closed that Minnesota game. But it's been a little quieter than we've seen Pat Bryant. And that's not all on him. That's on a quarterback who isn't really helped Pat Bryant keep pushing those levels we saw earlier in the season. I think Luke Almyer will have a bounce back game. I think Pat Bryant's going to be the one who gets back in that end zone and puts together a day.
All right. You and I are just taking the layups here, since we really don't take Luke Altmyer anymore here, even though we probably could now, but maybe I'll save that for my bold prediction. But I am going to go with Zachary Franklin because Charles Bentley is one of the better quarterbacks in the cornerbacks in the Big Ten. He's got 10 PBUs, 3 interceptions. He's allowed just 14 receptions on 37 targets. They run more zone, so it's not a lot of one-on-one coverage, but I do feel like he's going to get Pat Bryant a lot because that is still the guy you want to be on, even though he's a smaller cornerback. I feel like Zachary Franklin's going to have a lot of openings in this game because the other corners for Michigan State, and I will give them credit, their pass rush is anemic, so it doesn't help them. But I just feel like against zone, RPO, who's the guy? It's Zachary Franklin. So I feel like this could be one of those games where Zachary gets 12 targets and it might have 10 catches at the end of it. But you and I are just taking the layup because I think it's going to be a good passing game for Illinois, to be honest with you.
So I took Bryant, you took Franklin. Congratulations on Colin Dixon on being the real pick to click against Michigan State on Saturday.
Their slot corner has really struggled. I almost thought about Colin Dixon, but their slot corner has really, really struggled. Give it up. Let's see here. I got the stat. 21 receptions on 33 targets, 265 yards. And that's something with Luke. If you get one-on-one with Colin Dixon against that slot corner, don't overlook him just to force it to one of your top guys because there could be some opportunities for some of those guys. All right, defense. Who's your pick to click, Joe?
I'm still saving my nugget from earlier, Jeremy. You're right. Oh, gosh. It does feel like it's got to be a Matthew Bailey game. Like did I take yours?
It's okay.
You know what? Take yours.
No.
We're not now. You mentioned Matthew Bailey earlier. I just straight up stole that from you. I will go bold and take the other safety. Matt Krasevich. Like this feels like, I don't know why I don't really have a great read or feeling about it, I guess, but he's only going to have a half that we know he's going to play significant snaps. Obviously, he's a dime package guy. But for a team that's turnover prone, a guy who's proven he can just read those and make really good plays on the football, gives the whole, hey, it's okay without Miles Scott half. Well, I'll take him, and you can have Matthew Bailey.
I'm not taking Matthew Bailey, so if you want him, you can have it.
No, I've already just went on that whole thing. I had a better feel for that. It's there's no like real logic behind it other than like, yeah, that feels like it would work. And that's what I'm sticking with.
I'm sorry, Joe, to do this too. I'm just taking the layups in this one, but it's got to be Gabe Backus. It has to be Gabe Backus. If you want to be that NFL early entrant pick, this is a huge opportunity for you. This is a bad Michigan State offensive line, especially the right side of it has really struggled. Their right guard and right tackle, Joey, the 4th and 7th most pressures allowed so far this year, according to PFF. So Seth Coleman is going to get some of those opportunities, but Gabe Backus is the best defensive player on the front. I think Xavier Scott could give him the run for the money for best defensive player, but you got to get after Aiden Childs. You got to get pressure on him. You got to bring him down. You at least got to put pressure on him, though, to force some of those errors and mistakes. So, again, I think Aaron Henry needs to find a way to get Gabe Akis in some one-on-one opportunities because I don't think Michigan State can block him. So I feel like this could be one of those games that a pass rusher, a really good pass rusher, can get multiple sacks, many pressures. I feel like this got to be one of those game record games for Akis.
Do you remember that episode of The Office where Michael was trying to figure out how he was going to propose to Holly? And they said, like, if you have fire, you've done something wrong. Like, if you're in costume, you've done something wrong. Aaron Henry, if Gabe Akis is dropping off into coverage more than like 4 times, you've probably done something wrong.
Let's stop that
to the quarterback.
Yeah.
Like that. There is value into changing the picture, and like,
especially against a young quarterback, right?
Absolutely.
Like, so I don't mind if Seth Coleman is dropping into coverage because all of a sudden Aiden Shaw's like, wait, what's that? And then all of a sudden there's Gabe Akis right in his face. Like, against a young quarterback like this, I think changing the picture is great. But you know what I want? I want Gabe Akis still rushing the passer, and I want Kenenna Odeluga or Malachi Hood or James Coots coming out of blitz because those guys are actually all pretty good blitzers. I still want 4 coming after him. I like changing the picture, but I still want to try and put a quarterback under duress, especially a young one.
Yeah, the picture, you can change it all you want, but the foundation of the picture has to be Gabe Akis
in your
getting
face
to the quarterback. Like that's what and if it's something I wanted to get with to Aaron Henry on Monday, like, how do you balance that? Where obviously you have a guy who's the best player on your team at getting after the quarterback. How do you balance what you find to be the value in changing the picture with him in coverage? Like, I'm with you. Find some other ways to change it because the best picture you've got is Gabe Akis trying to make life a nightmare for quarterbacks. I did one thing before we get to bold predictions, because you mentioned these two. This is a sneaky, interesting final 3 games for defensive early entrant candidates with Gabe Akis and Xavier Scott. This is a very big NIL up the price stretch for those guys.
Or just be a top 100 pick.
Or just go pro. Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, and when I say NIL up the price, I don't mean portaling. I mean, hey, the NFL, I can get this if I picked X. Like that's kind of a subplot here. Is 2 of your best players are early entrant candidates in the draft. And that's a huge storyline to me, this final 3 games.
Feels like Xavier Scott's a little higher rated than Gabe Akis, but man, if you end the season well, I'm telling you, like you can really up your value here. All right, bold prediction, Joey. What do you got?
Kenenna Odeluga, 2+ tackles for a loss, and that could be sacks.
You know why I would love that? You know why I'd love that? Because Kenenna Odeluga is one of the best quotes on this team, and I would love to talk to him after the game.
Absolutely, yeah. He will give us like the most thorough breakdown of this year. And it will be just riveting conversation because he's such a good quote. But the reality is, Aaron Henry, he was asked about 3rd down. We asked him about 3rd down, and he kind of said, I learned that our 3rd downs were probably too similar to our early downs. And when he said that, all I'm hearing in my brain is, Kenenna Odeluga needs to be on the field. He needs to be out there, especially without Dylan Rosiak. Even if you're concerned about him coming back from that injury and his ability to play in space, which I think it's the heart of why we haven't seen him play defensive snaps. It's that Brett Bielema has said that he's not quite physically the same as he was pre-injury. I think that means space. 3rd down, do what he's best at and let him be a different picture, as we've talked about, to getting after the quarterback. I think it sets up for that, Jeremy, and I'll take him at 2+ tackles for loss.
All right, I thought about doing the Matt Krasevich interception thing because that's a fun storyline to watch in that first half. I thought about Colin Dixon having a big play, a big explosive play. But I am just going to lean into what I feel going into this matchup. I feel like it's a great matchup for Luke Almyer. I feel like he had a week to figure out how to get the most of him. I think Luke Almyer has one of his best games of the year. I'm going to say 3+ touchdowns, 250+ yards. Is that bold enough?
Yeah.
Do I need to go higher? I'll go 300+ yards.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll go.
You're the guy at the poker table you're the guy at the not even poker, freaking blackjack, where you just keep pushing money and no one's moved any cards. You just keep throwing it in there.
400, yeah. I'll go 400. Yeah. No,
there are some gamblers listening, like these guys don't know how to gamble at all. I gotta call Piper in.
I think there's gonna be one of his best games of the year. And that's why I will pick Illinois to win this game. I just like the matchup on paper. I didn't against Minnesota, a solid team, good defensive team, a quarterback who's a veteran, a good running back. I didn't feel great with that matchup. I like this matchup. Maybe I'm wrong, and we got to do the corrections next week, Joey, when we meet again. But I just feel like this is a good matchup and a really good matchup for Luke Almyer. Michigan State doesn't get any pressure. Their DBs outside of Brantley, they're fine. They're not great in coverage. I just feel like this is the one where Luke Almyer can bounce back.
Yeah, and I think without a team that doesn't get a lot of pressure, it's a good chance for the offensive line to really, I don't want to say build their confidence because that assumes that it's not high. And I don't want to make that assumption without them saying like, yeah, whoa, don't know if we can block anyone. They've not said that. But this is a good chance for the offensive line to really kind of have that continuity that, yeah, we kept our quarterback upright. Like, puff your chest out a little bit and not have that be a story. If it becomes a story, then then we're talking a different tone on Saturday. But I think just as good as it is for Luke, it's good for that line to get a little bit of that kind of swagger back.
All right, we're getting football back at Memorial Stadium. I'm excited to see what these final 3 games have for Illinois because, again, they still got a chance at 9 wins, which I think has only happened 7 times in program history. It's 7 or 8. They got a chance at 8 wins, which doesn't happen very often in Illinois history. But, man, you feel like they need a bounce back. Should be a beautiful day at Memorial Stadium, Joey. I would expect 50+ thousand. I don't know if it's going to be as strong a crowd as Minnesota, but I'm interested to see what that number is because I think it would be, 6 of the 7 games or 50+ thousand here at Memorial Stadium this year, and that's a big step in the right direction for Illinois. So if you can end the season with a couple more wins, you can make that a regularity here at Memorial Stadium.
Yeah, can I say that this Oakland game that's at 8 p.m. tonight would have been much better served on Friday night? Let it get a little double dip. You don't play Alabama.
Yeah.
Alabama, you don't play them until Wednesday. So, yeah, I mean, you probably want a week off basketball going into that Alabama game, but I think that you could have had a good chance for a Friday night, Saturday doubleheader. Those as a concert at State Farm Center Friday, so never mind.
All right, well, Joey and I will be back for our post-game podcast after the 1:30 kickoff, the rare 1:30 kickoff against Michigan State here at Memorial Stadium on FS1. But appreciate you listening to the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Give us a follow, rating, and review wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell as well. For Joey Wagner, I'm Jeremy Werner. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.